Behind me is an off-road legend, the Toyota 4Runner. It's made its name, it's proven itself to be one of the most capable, long-lasting four-wheel drives the world has ever seen. And next to it is a family-hauling mom car that happens to have some crazy off-road tech. And in this video, we're going to put both of them through the TFL slip test, get them on the lift to see how they're engineered, and then get them out in some dirt and find out, can an old, clapped-out Mercedes mom car really be as cool as a Toyota 4Runner off-road? Well, let's go hit it. One of the best parts about this car is that it's huge, and when it comes to legal representation, bigger is better. When you're hurt, you deserve the best on your side. Insurance companies will often lowball clients' claims. Morgan & Morgan will fight to get you the money you deserve. Just in the past 12 months, Morgan & Morgan saw verdicts of $12 million in Florida, 34 times the highest insurance offer, and $26 million in Philadelphia, 40 times the highest insurance offer. Morgan & Morgan make finding a lawyer for your injury case easy, fast, and free. The fee is completely free unless you win. Submitting a claim for an injury doesn't have to be a stuffy process. With Morgan & Morgan, you can submit a claim without ever having to leave the couch. 8 clicks or less and you're done. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/TFL. That is forthepeople.com/TFL. Now back to the episode. Alright, this is the TFL slip test. Now in this test, we get various wheels stuck on purpose in these rollers to see how the all-wheel drive system or four-wheel drive system perform in a controlled environment, and then that'll give us a good sense of how the vehicle will perform off-road. Now this first test is a rear wheel slip test, so both rollers are underneath the rear wheels, and in this 4Runner, well, we're going to have a rear wheel drive setup primarily for driving around every day. And what that means is that when the rear wheels are stuck, you're not going anywhere. If you're stuck in the snow, if you're going through some kind of rough terrain, you really gotta select four-wheel drive. That's going to engage the front axle, as we've done there, and now drove right off. So this is a selectable four-wheel drive system versus a Mercedes, which operates a little differently. All right, now for the Mercedes GL on the slip test. Now this vehicle operates pretty differently from the 4Runner. So this uses a full-time four-wheel drive system with a center differential, and that center differential allows the front and the rear wheels to spin at different speeds so you don't crab around corners. And then we also have a center differential lock, which is both a manual or an automatic engagement. So we're going to run in the auto setting like you drive this car every day. So rear wheels are stuck in the rollers, not going to touch any buttons. Nice and settled. We're in neutral, into drive, off of the brake, onto the accelerator, and you can see off we drove. So there really was no slipping whatsoever. The front wheels were engaged. Regardless of how you drive this car, regardless of what buttons you push, it's always in four-wheel drive, and off we went. So that is an advantage of driving this vehicle every day, like in the snow and the ice and the slush. This vehicle's never not in four-wheel drive. All right, next up is the diagonal slip test. So the left front and the right rear are stuck in the rollers. The other two are on the ground, and they're going to have to engage if we're to get unstuck. We're going to neutral, nice and settled. Very common off-road, in the snow, going up snowy curbs, that kind of thing. So 4 high in this 4Runner. No locker, no A-track, no modes engaged. Let's see what happens. So we're nice and settled. Off the brake, the gas. Wow, so just a little tiny bit of spin, and off we drove. Part of it's because we have such good articulation, such aggressive meaty tires. We'll try it one more time. Once again, this is just 4 high. Yeah, almost no slip whatsoever, and off we drove. So great result in the Toyota. Diagonal slip test in the Mercedes. Let's see how it compares to the Toyota. Backing out of the rollers. We're leaving the vehicle in the auto setting for the differential locks. Not touching any buttons. In neutral, vehicle is nice and settled. Into drive, there we go. Put off the brake, onto the accelerator. Oh, very impressive results. So just a tiny hint of slippage, and then the vehicle really pulled itself off with almost no difficulty here. We'll try that one more time. Come on, Mercedes, get it nice and settled into the rollers. into neutral, off the brake, onto the accelerator. All right, so just a little bit of slip. Got the flash of the traction control, and off we drove with no drama whatsoever. Guys, thank you so much for watching the series. It was a ton of fun to make, and I can't believe I get to bring this car to all of you wonderful viewers. Now, we're publishing these series every Saturday for the next few weeks, but if you simply can't wait for the next episode, head over to patreon.com/TFLcar, where all the episodes are live right now for Patreon supporters. And actually, this series literally could not be done without Patreon, because one of you guys out there, Mike, a Patreon follower, actually was the one who alerted us about his mom's car for sale. So thank you, Mike, for making this series happen, and thank you to all of our Patreon members. You can check out the rest of the videos there right now. Now, next up is the 3-wheel slip test. So 3 wheels are completely stuck. Only the right rear is on the ground. And we're gonna start this test in 4 high in this Toyota. This is an extreme test. Wheels are spinning. All right, so check that out. So that noise you heard was the traction control system working to distribute torque where it needed to go. And this time though, we're gonna engage low range, and we're gonna try using the 8-track system, and then we'll try it with the locker as well. So 8-track is an advanced traction control which kicks in and distributes torque left and right very quickly. A little button up here we're gonna push, and let's see if we can notice a difference. Accelerator. Okay, all right, very, very good. So a little bit of slip, and then 8-track figured out exactly what we wanted to do, and off we drove. Very impressive. We also have crawl control in this 4Runner, but I'm gonna just jump right ahead and then demonstrate the rear locker. So push a button up here. Now this light's gonna flash. And immediately, I mean, it's like nothing. It just drove right off and that rear locker engaged. So there you can see the difference between no 8-track, 8-track, and then the rear locker. And we'll see how that compares to the Mercedes. All right, 3-wheel slip test. Only the right rear is on the ground. So this is going to be a nice little challenge here for the Mercedes. And we're going to start out in normal mode, auto function on the diff locks. Not going to engage anything. Let's see what happens. So, on the throttle. Okay, we're getting some wheel spin, some braking. Oh wow! So even in the auto function, the lockers engaged like they were supposed to, and we drove off with almost no difficulty. Go ahead and try it one more time, but with the locker engaged, center and the rear locker now engaged. Into drive. Let's see if we just drive right off the situation. Okay, very impressive. So you could see the difference there between having the auto diffs take over and figure out when the wheels are slipping versus leaving it in or just engaging the diffs manually. So there's a pretty noticeable difference there. But let's go to the hardest test yet. All right, now for the hardest test. So this is a 3-wheel slip test with the right front on the ground. So we're in neutral. We're going to start this vehicle in 4 low, 8-track off. In the drive. All right. So wheels are spinning. All right. So we got a lot of spinning, but nothing's happening. And that's because there's little to no traction control intervention. So I push the 8-track button. See the difference? So immediately, you heard that brake activation, you heard the left front wheel slowing down, forcing wheel speed to the right wheel, and we drove off. Toyota has such an effective 4-wheel drive system, but let's see if the Mercedes can get out of that pickle. Only the right front on the ground now. Let's see how the Mercedes performs. We're in auto mode, no special programs. Wow, we got a lot of torque transfer to the front right. I mean, it's almost like this thing had a front locker and off it drove. It really is a magnificent four-wheel drive system in this Mercedes. You can engage the diff lock in high range. You don't have to go into low range. You can engage it pretty much anytime, whenever you want, or just leave it in auto and let the car figure out when it wants to lock itself up. And you can go places you just wouldn't believe with this four-wheel drive system. Alright, now obviously this is not a particularly fair comparison. We've got a 7-seat luxury limo going up against the lifted 4Runner, but look, the 4Runner is in Colorado everywhere. It is probably the most popular four-wheel drive for sale today and yesterday and also tomorrow. So, you know, we gotta compare it against the gold standard. And we're gonna go up our trenches course to see how the four-wheel drive systems work in real life up an obstacle. So we're gonna go into low range in this 4Runner. And we're going to talk about some other important aspects of off-roading, not just four-wheel drive system and underbody protection, but also articulation. And these 4Runners are set up to have good wheel travel and are set up to keep wheels in contact with the dirt as much as possible. And then this kind of elephant hole course here, that's going to be very, very important. So we're starting in 4 low, 8-track off. The goal is to take this as nice and slow as possible. We also have these oversized tires, which are going to help kind of reach the bottom of the holes. Look, and here you can see the vehicle's bouncing up and down, but we are stuck. So let's go ahead and engage 8-track, 4 low, a little bit of throttle. And you can see immediately the difference, right? The brakes start grabbing. The vehicle starts fighting its way up the obstacle. And it's also flexing nicely, especially with that solder axle. Keep it in contact with the ground as much as possible, and then it walks up perfectly. Really, really good result. Look, one of the things that people don't realize with these 4Runners, the 5th gens, is that even used, the values are just out of this world. We're talking $35,000, $40,000, $45,000 for a low mileage one with some nice mods. People really, really, really want these vehicles, and they are really willing to pay, and for good reason, because they are reliable. And that is, of course, one of the reasons that the GLs depreciate so quickly, is because they're known to be problematic. Now for this next test, we're going to have to engage the rear locking diff and see what difference that makes going up the very same course. Good visibility out of this 4Runner as well. Really easy to see out of. Look, the powertrain in this vehicle is old and durable. It's a 5-speed automatic with a 4-liter V6. That comes with its pros and its cons. The pros, it will last till the end of time. The cons, as James will tell you, going up by 70 at 70 miles an hour, this vehicle is working hard. It is not a high-performance machine, but you can see that rear locker. We just walk up the obstacle like it wasn't even there. I definitely have a lot of respect for what these machines can do. All right, the Mercedes going through the same trenches course in the Onyx Off-Road Andre's Pit. Onyx Off-Road is our go-to off-road navigation. They are awesome. You can download maps when you're in reception, use them offline, and know exactly where you're going so you're never lost. Now look, the GL has some fundamental challenges that the 4Runner doesn't. This is meant primarily to be a luxury 3-row SUV, and as such, it is a long boy. This has a super long wheelbase, and that does hurt it. Now, if you got the super rare off-road package, which this one has, and I do mean super rare in the States, I've never actually seen another one ever. Abroad, it was standard, but in the States, no one optioned it. But it gave you the low range, it gave you a different suspension calibration, it gave you the locking rear diff, it gave you all sorts of crazy stuff for a $75,000 luxury Mercedes. And we're gonna use that stuff today. So we've gone into the second of 3 off-road suspension heights. So we're a couple inches above standard, and I'm gonna go into low range. So I'm gonna select the LR button, low range engaged, and I'm not going to touch the diff. We're going to leave it in the auto function and see how it compares to the Toyota. One of the challenges with air suspension is as you raise a vehicle up, you start to limit the down travel, and you really don't have a lot of articulation, and we just saw that there. So where the 4Runner flexed through that first hole like it was nothing, the Mercedes has to rely on its traction control system to get through that, which, thank God, it is so fantastic. Genuinely one of the best I've ever tested. It doesn't sound very refined. Boy, does it work. So try to keep nice, consistent throttle application there. Let the system do its job, which it is doing. Lifting up that right front tire. Look at that. Look at that. It feels so weird doing stuff like this with heated seats and the walnut steering wheel, but off it went. So that was with none of the lockers engaged. That was just letting the computers do everything. Now the best thing that we did to this Mercedes is we installed a set of these BFG trail terrain tires, and this is a great setup on this car. Strongly recommended. If you have like a crossover, you want to make it perform a little better off-road, but you don't want to go to the compromises, the loudness, the expense, in some cases the wear of a full all-terrain. These trail terrains are a great option. They're 3 peak snow rated. They work great in the snow. They're so quiet on road, easily as quiet as an all season, but then they provide a lot more capability off-road. So now we're going to try out that rear locker. So I'm going to flick the knob over, 2 clicks. The center and the rear are now locked up. Got a little indicator here on the dash, and let's see if we notice a difference. Okay, straight away we're still picking up tires, but we're able to maintain consistent, constant momentum with no slip whatsoever coming from the front or the back. That 4.5 liter V8, like nothing is there. It's still picking up wheels, but we have the clearance for it. The max height, we have something like 12 inches of ground clearance. We're not even in the max height, we don't need it. But look at that. Just humming along. The car is actually really happy. You lock up that rear diff, you do nice gentle throttle applications. I mean, it's amazing. This is not a G-Wagon. This is an $8,000 Mercedes with 124,000 miles, and it just walks up stuff like it's nothing. So an impressive machine considering what it is, considering we can haul 7 people in leather-lined comfort. It's really, really good. All right, so we're here with James, who's the owner of this particular 4Runner, and he's going to take us through some of the engineering and some of the modifications he's done on the underside. And James, first of all, this thing looks like a battleship underneath here.
Yes. So these skid plates, these are from a company in North Carolina called Bud Built. So I off-road this truck extensively. So I did a full set of skids. These are steel, not aluminum. They are powder coated. So about every year or so, I just go and hit them up with some black like Rust-Oleum or something like that. But about the truck, 2018 4Runner, pretty standard, Toyota 4x4 system. It defaults to 2 high, and then you can go 4 high or 4 low. It's independent front suspension, obviously. Some of this armor is, as you can see from the scratches, very functional. Yeah. Some of it is a little more cosmetic. So these guys on the A-arms, for example, for the type of wheeling we do up here, where you don't have a lot of like mud and sticks and stuff, pokey things, this is largely cosmetic. But if you lived somewhere that had a lot of mud and sticks and stuff, then this would protect your CV boots from basically taking a stick and ripping.
Now this truck, is a Tier D off-road 4Runner, and it would have had some protection from the factory.
Yes.
So what was the reasoning behind, ripping out, for example, like the engine skid and going to a custom setup?
Sure. So where the factory skid stops, basically it comes a little bit past right here, and then it stops, and then the rest of it's their standard skid setup, which is roughly 1/16 inch aluminum. The way that I explain it is, it's not designed to hold the weight of the truck. And all of these skid plates will hold the weight of the truck. I can put a jack underneath here, lift the whole truck up. These skids do stick down a little bit lower, so what you see if you shop enough skid designs, what you see is the bolts are inset, and that's to protect the bolt heads. In some of these cases, they move the skids up a little bit, and they come up with a different kind of protective way to protect the bolt heads.
Yeah.
This is one of the flattest, kind of like, so when you get on top of something, you can slide. Where some of the other ones, they try to get every inch of ground clearance. What they end up creating is a lot of edges that catch on things. So I just wanted something pretty flat where I could slide on things.
Now walk me through these suspensions. So who does it, and what are some of the pros and the cons of your suspension setup?
Sure. So I went with Old Man Emu, similar to what we're starting to see on the new Trail Hunter trucks. So it's a remote reservoir, basically racing type suspension. It has configurable compression and rebound. The thing about this suspension it's very soft for small undulations, so you can go really fast. Aired down on washboards, I can go 50 miles an hour and not have any problems at all. But then when it starts to fully compress, then it starts to firm up and do a lot better. And that's the biggest difference I would say I noticed between like the remote resi versus the non-remote resi. What I typically tell people when people ask me about suspension stuff, they ask, is it worth it? Objectively, it's not. This doesn't get you any more clearance than any other like cheaper suspension, right? The base old Ben Emu suspension for these trucks is about $900. This suspension is like $2,700.
And then obviously solid rear axle design. Have you found any issues with the control arm mount and getting caught up and stuff?
Yes. So this is a very common spot for you to get caught up on things, just because it's like the first like angled down thing for about 5 or 6 feet. So what we typically recommend is some kind of armoring for this. The metal for this is actually really thin. So if you hit it enough, it'll get to the point where it kind of mangles it to where it's hard to put armor on after the fact, or it's hard to swap your rear control arms. These are upgraded as well. This is a company here in Colorado that makes these, and the factory ones are really weak, and you see a lot of instances online where people... So what ends up happening is you get up on a rock, something that's like a really sheer drop, you get the truck up on it, and then you bring it forward, and the first thing it hits is right here, and it just bends it right in the middle. And then at that point, you end up shortening. It pulls the axle forward on one side, and the car kind of crab walks as it's moving around.
Right. And then on the rear end too, you've got a diff cover.
Yes, yeah, so rear diff skid. The thing I would say, the important thing about this is make sure that you get one that's got a drain hole here. That way you don't have to take it off all the time. I have had instances where on the trail some of these bolts kind of loosened up and started making some clacking noises, so I used a lot of Loctite.
So getting the GL up on the lift, we see a bunch of differences compared to the 4Runner. First of all, the GL is a unibody construction, which means that the body itself is structural, versus the 4Runner, which is a body on frame, where this frame is taking the vast majority of the strains from driving on and off road. Now, the suspension design is also very different. So the 4Runner is an independent front suspension with a solid rear axle. The Mercedes is 4-corner independent suspension. It's a twin A-arm setup here. You can see the lower control arm. And it's also an air suspension design. So it's got an air strut above that can change the height of the vehicle up to about 4 inches. It's a pretty long travel setup. And this is a kind of an interesting design. The air strut actually has a little loop through the middle so that the half shaft can pass through to the hub, which is crazy. They put all this work into the suspension and into the four-wheel drive system, and then they keep a lot of stuff very unshielded. So this is probably the weak part of this. So up front we have a radiator, which is very exposed, with a cooling line that's even more exposed. We do have a couple cross members, which do protect the engine somewhat. Same thing with the transmission, and it is tucked up quite nice and high. There you can see the front differential. And then as we come over to the transfer case, got another cross member here providing a little bit of protection, but like I said, a lot of this is still pretty much completely exposed. There's a drive shaft that runs not only above the exhaust, but above the heat shielding. Better hope you don't have to replace that. And then we've got, of course, the fuel tank designs. Now, you do have some light protection, not a whole ton. And what is nice is the fuel tank is tucked up quite high above the sill, so there's really no low-hanging fruit here, which is good. But look, if you wanted to take this thing into the same kind of stuff that James is taking as 4Runner, you're going to have to get skid plates. And because nobody knows about these vehicles, they're going to have to make skid plates, which gets pretty costly unless you're very, very talented. Now out back, things get even stranger. So also an independent suspension design, but with this crazy multi-link design, these really wide-spanning lower control arms with another link behind the lower control arms, and of course air struts above that. And then this is actually a true dual exhaust system, which is kind of fun. It never comes into one port. It's true duals all the way back. There's that electronic locking rear differential. And then way out back is actually the air compressor for the height adjustable suspension. Mercedes was thoughtful. They knew it was kind of exposed, so they put a little skid plate on there so you don't go ripping it off out on your German trails. So James, what do you think of the 4Runner that if you owned it for 6 years? Has it treated you pretty well?
It's been bulletproof, reliable. I only drive this in bad weather and off-road, and for what I've done to this truck, for it to not have any complaints has been amazing. I help run a big event in Ouray called the Rocky Mountain Toyota Roundup. I'm off-roading this thing probably 15 to 20 weekends a year,
Wow.
I did all the mods myself, so just extensive work done to it, extensive time spent off-road, and for it to not have any problems over that period of time has just been amazing.
Yeah, I mean, and you've wheeled it hard, clearly, by the bashes on the underside. So what are some things that you dislike about it that are some of the compromises?
Sure. So I wish it had a V8, which is why people buy the GX version, right? Because it's basically this, but with a V8. Yeah, I wish it had a little bit more power. I wish it had more gears. In terms of creature comforts, it's got heated seats and a sunroof and all that stuff, so it's a pretty nice place to be. It's more creature comforts than my FJ. I had a 2011 FJ before this. But I think at the end of the day, we all want a GX.
Yeah, that's true, right? I mean, you got a lot more comfort, a lot more on-road ability, a lot more power.
Yeah.
But you can't quite do the same kind of trails that you'd be able to do in this.
Yeah, that's true. In the GX, it's a lot more expensive to mod cosmetically, because the bumper on that is a lot more kind of stylish looking. So yeah, a lot of the same suspension parts fit, a lot of the same armor parts fit, but it's the outer kind of cosmetic body parts that are a little more difficult to get for the GX, just because so many fewer people off-road them versus the 4Runner.
James, are you impressed with the Mercedes?
I will say the thing I noticed the most when whatever the equivalent version of A-Track was with the traction control, was a lot quieter with this than with the 4Runner. You hardly heard this at all. Kind of struggle on those whoop-de-doos, versus the 4Runner where the ABS is very loud.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mercedes, considering this car is 10 years older than the 4Runner, they had a lot of really impressive technology. And I kind of wish they had marketed some of that or made it available to people to know about the technology, because these cars really are very impressive for what they are. Now, they are limited by the fact that they're so big and heavy and long, right? And of course, they didn't want to take sales away from the G-Wagon, but I wish they'd sold more of these, because it would be kind of fun to build the aftermarket community around the GL, right? Everyone goes out and buys 4Runners and GXs, but there is a community of the Volkswagen Touaregs and the GLs that do have the stuff you need to go off-road, but it's just the people don't know about it, or the community is too small to really make aftermarket profitable.
Yeah, and the bracing underneath was pretty impressive as well. I mean, it was braced in all the right places, maybe not as many skid plates as you would normally like. But with that bracing, if you wanted to get creative and kind of mount some things to that, you could easily do that. Yeah,
and it's a lot cheaper than a 4Runner, but after a year of ownership, it'll probably be about the same.
Yeah.
So of course, ownership costs are going to be much higher. Okay, now look, the Mercedes is nowhere near as capable as that Toyota off-road. It doesn't have the same angles, it doesn't have the same protection, but for what it is, for $8,000 worth of luxury limo, it does pretty darn well, and I think Mercedes should be proud, if not a little disappointed that they didn't sell more of them here in the US with that crazy cool off-road pack. Guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. Huge thank you to James for bringing his Toyota, and we'll see you in the next video. $92,000 versus $8,000. Push that up, and that's going to put the suspension into the high setting. And we also have these nice nifty cameras. And then the driving experience. It's an absolute tank. It's a tank.